Religion 35, In Search of the Good. Some claim that In Search of the Good is too difficult for students and even teachers. What is your response to that concern?
The outcomes in the program of studies that would tie into the resource are definitely something that the kids need to consider. Everything in the grade 12 year is about ethics and morals and about sending out into the world. And so students consider why it's important to be ethical. They look at it from a Catholic perspective. They consider morality from world religions. They look at what that means for authentic relationships. And the concept of justice and community is important. And so for our grade 12s, the last thing we want them to do is we are, in theory, sending them out as fully formed Catholics is to consider what is good. And so in the teacher resource and in the textbook, the reading level is quite high. And so we'll have kids that struggle with the reading level. The concepts and material, I think, are reachable for all of our kids. So our job is to make it more reachable for the students.
And what would you say are the three most basic things that students should achieve by doing the In Search of the Good curriculum?
That they consider for themselves what is good. And so for most of our kids, their sense of what's good is often connected to things that are pleasurable or things that are very temporal to where their lives are right now. And what we do in Search of the Good is to take a step back and have them consider a little bit more of a big picture, and that sometimes what's good isn't always what's most pleasurable or what's most temporal in that time. It's things that are, like I said before, so authentic relationships, the idea of justice and mercy, how does that fit in? And basically, it's an opportunity for them to reflect in their life and their family, what do they want? What is good? What are they called to do?
Why should you not skip Units 1 and 2? Why are they considered the essential units?
So for me, I found that Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 in the first unit first of all, those are mentioned explicitly in the program of studies. So in some way you have to teach them. And then the second unit, or the second main outcome, deals with the Sermon on the Mount, prophetic call, and then a little bit on the modern church and church structure. So in order to actually understand the self-revelation of God, you have to cover Exodus, you have to cover the Sermon on the Mount. And those three chapters, 4, 5, and 6, are Unit 2, and that's what they cover explicitly. I can't find that in another resource. So I think you have to pull from In Search of the Good, because it's specifically for that. In Unit 1, the three philosophers are mentioned are Kant, Levinas, and Aristotle. Again, the reading in the textbook is high, but there's ways to make it reachable for the kids. So they have to be covered because they're explicitly referenced in the program of studies. And those three philosophers, none of them are Catholic, yet the Catholic Church has officially adopted their philosophy as part of its doctrine. We use that approach. We use deontological ethics. We use teleological ethics. The face of the other is essentially the golden rule. And if you skip those three philosophers, when you get to the Sermon on the Mount, you start talking about the Beatitudes and you start talking about what Jesus mentioned as the greatest commandment. If you don't see the ethics of those three philosophers in there, you don't make that connection. You won't make that connection if you skip the first unit. So I still go with the three philosophers, and then I make sure that I can connect them to what they're doing in the second unit.
Mapping the ethical experience is an important first step in grade 12 In Search of the Good, because it both gives foundations to some ethical theories, but it also touches on things that come later in the course. As you get deeper into both theological ethics and also societal ethics, the question comes up of moral standards moral responsibilities, and moral identities. And if these foundations aren't put in, then what happens is there's less understanding about the concepts of standards, responsibility, and identity, because the goal is to have our students look towards, I understand that a standard is imposed on me. I understand a responsibility is my choice to agree or disagree, and to understand that their identity is how they live their life. Do they follow a moral standard? Do they follow the morality put in from religion, put in from society? So when we look at the ethical experience and we look at different ethicists and their philosophies, what we're doing is we're setting up our students so that they can have a better grasp on those concepts of what's going to happen later in the course. So the first thing to talk about is the ethical experience. A lot of students are coming in thinking just ethics and morals are, do I do good or do I do bad? When really there's a little bit more to that. The first ethical experience is, of course, the scream. You hear, you're on a beach. Things are perfect. The waves are crashing against the shores. You're in a tranquil moment when all of a sudden you hear a scream. It's a call to action. The understanding that first ethical experience of the scream is what we do when we're startled from our tranquility. Now, the scream doesn't need to be a scream per se. Perhaps it's you're teaching a class and all of a sudden a fight breaks out in the hall, or you're walking down the stairs to get to lunch and someone falls. It's a call to action. It's a break from the tranquility. It's saying, what are you going to do? And that's the first ethical experience. And it's something that oftentimes we don't take a look at. We take it for granted, because we don't think, oh, something just happened and I'm reacting, or I'm not reacting, because not reacting is part of the reaction. So first, we have that first very basic thing we need to react to. Second, the beggar. How do we react to the other? When we look at the beggar, it even ties us with Emmanuel Levinas, who we'll talk about later when he talks about the ethics of the human face. But the beggar, what are you going to do when you see someone in need? What are you going to do when you're faced with the other? How do I interact with people? How do I interact with people who are above me? How do I interact with people who are below me? How do I interact with the poorest person in the world or the richest king? When we're faced with the other, how do we react? Again, moral standards, moral responsibility, moral identity, which pushes towards a theological understanding of morals based on there's something more. We're put on the world with other people. Who is the other? I always think about it when Cain is approached by God saying, where's Abel? Where is he? Well, I can't find him. And Abel says, am I my brother's keeper? When we're faced with the ethical experience of the other, the answer to that question is a resounding yes, I am my brother's keeper. I am responsible for the other. The next ethical experience, the I have to experience, the response to obligation. This is one that students will get. You will have no problem looking at and convincing them and teaching this, because they're obligated to come to school. What are your obligations in life? It's an ethical experience to actually complete them. Here's your assignment. You now have an I have to ethical experience. And what are you going to do? The moral standard, here is your assignment. The moral responsibility, do you agree with the assignment? Do you disagree? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? The moral identity, do you do the assignment? They understand obligation. It's a great time to tell stories from your life. I was really tired last Monday, but I still made it to work. The obligation is an ethical experience. Finally, the intolerable. The intolerable is the ethical experience of I am so moved by this that I cannot do anything but something to change it. Oftentimes we look at this in how our schools and our students are helping people in developed nations. When we talk about wars or dictators, we do not tolerate it. You know, racism, sexism, things like that. Things that we do not tolerate fall into this last category, this final category of ethical experiences. Again, it kind of flips that moral standard, responsibility, identity on its head. When you think about, what if you're in a country where one of the moral standards imposed by that country is something that fits into your category of intolerable? How do you stay an ethical person and yet still have that experience? So, to recap on that, the ethical experiences are the scream, broken out of the tranquility. What are you going to do in the moment? The other, how do you react to the other people in your life? And that isn't just mom, dad, teacher, friends, that's everybody. Who's the other to you? The I have to, the feeling of obligation. What are you obligated to do? Is it come to work? Is it go to school? What are your obligations? And finally, the intolerable. When you look inside yourself, what is intolerable? And when you see that and you know that, it is impossible not to act.
What are the strengths that you have experienced in this curriculum?
I think that when the kids have a chance to actually reflect and think about it personally, then they feel it was a valuable experience. And so by trying to take it a little bit deeper, but making the text reasonable in reading level, the kids actually felt that there was value in what they were learning. It was a serious course, and they actually had an opportunity to kind of understand for the Catholic kids where their church comes from, where its morality and theology comes from, but for all of the kids to have a chance for personal reflection. That made a big difference for them.
Now, you've already mentioned the reading level as a challenge. What are some of the other challenges in this program?
A lot of the activities in the teacher resource don't clearly show how they're meeting the outcome. And so you have to take a look at each of the activities and then actually try to make the bridge yourself. And so in Search of the Good, in the first unit, a lot of different experiential choices, but they don't necessarily show exactly how the unit or how the outcome is being reached. So for me, I like to go back and I'll make some of my own activities, or I'll take theirs and alter it so that it's a very clear example to the kids of, this is what I wanted you to learn, and this activity is how you're going to do it. Another issue is time. A lot of the stuff that's put out from the bishops, it's very difficult to cover in the amount of time that you have. And so how I divide the program is into 4 main units. So I'll do the first unit on the 3 philosophers, so that one's dealing with ethics, morals, conscience, and the 3 philosophers. And then the second unit, the self-revelation unit, is probably my longest unit. Spend a good time on Exodus and prophetic call, so the kids understand the concept of covenant revelation and prophetic call. And then we get into the self-revelation through the Word becoming flesh, and we look at the Sermon on the Mount, and we'll break it down into the Beatitudes. We look at Jesus' teaching on the law, and then the concept, the eschatological piece of the end of time and the narrow gate.